So let's get started with a few basics. So I have a pretty politically engaged following that sort of reads this stuff, listens to this stuff. I know you're actually going to be familiar to some of those folks, but just, level setting, walk me through who you are, run for something, the work you guys are doing.
So I'm Amanda Litman, born and raised in Northern Virginia, went to Northwestern for college. And when I was a senior in college, I started interning on the Obama campaign. I was hired before I graduated. We won. That was so fun. I was doing online fundraising and volunteer recruitment. Stayed working in Chicago for Organizing for Action for a year, moved down to Florida to work on the governor's race in 2014, where I was the digital director for the Democrat running for governor that year. And then I moved to New York, where I now live to work for Secretary Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign in 2015. I was her email director. So again, online fundraising and volunteer recruitment. And then we lost. And that was really sad. About a week after Election Day, I started hearing from people I'd gone to high school and college with who were like, "Hey, Amanda, I'm a public school teacher in Chicago. I'm thinking about running for office because if Trump can do this, seems like anybody can do this. What do I do? Who do I call? You're the only person I know that works in politics. I don't know where to go." And at the time, if you were young and newly excited about politics, and you wanted to do more than vote and more than volunteer, there was nowhere you could go that would answer your call. And that to me felt like a symptom of really big problems, both in our democracy, but also in the Democratic Party. So I reached out to a whole bunch of people with an idea. What if we started an organization to solve this problem? One of those folks became my co-founder, Ross Morales Ricchetto, and we wrote a plan, and we built a website, and then we launched Run for Something on Trump's first inauguration day back in 2017. We thought it'd be really small. We'd get 100 people in the first year. We had 1,000 people sign up in the first week. And as of today, we have more than 260,000 young people all across the country who've raised their hands to run for office. We've endorsed more than 4,000. We've helped elect more than 1,654 across 49 states plus DC. And we're the largest candidate pipeline in politics.
I mean, amazing stuff. Okay, so you have this organization, and then almost a year ago this week, is it a year ago today, actually?
Happy birthday to my book.
Well, shit, happy book birthday. A year
Thank
ago
you.
today, this will come out tomorrow, a year ago yesterday, but, your book comes out, When We're in Charge, The Next Generation's Guide to Leadership. So this is actually more of a book about leadership than politics per se, a lot of politics in there. Um, Obviously, you started this work, I assume, during the late stage Biden years, the book itself, then Trump
Mhm.
wins. Things are different all over the place right now. So tell me what you were trying to do with the book at first, and
Yeah.
then, how it feels like a year out.
It's an interesting question. So I started working on the book really at some point throughout 2023 because I'd started hearing from a bunch of reporters who were like, "Hey, seems like all of your candidates, Mallory McMorrow, Zoe Zephyr in Montana, even the Justins in Tennessee, who, while they were not our candidates, were part of the broader conversation around, in particular, millennial and Gen Z politicians who kept like making national headlines." And they asked me, like, what do these people have in common besides, a bunch of them worked with you all? And I realized actually there was something really interesting going on, which is millennial and Gen Z leaders were entering systems and structures not built for people like us and doing things differently. And that wasn't just in politics. It was something I'd experienced running a company for most of the last decade. It was something I was hearing from my peers, from my colleagues. I was seeing it in, on my TikTok For You page, on over Instagram, of people talking about millennial bosses doing things a little bit differently. So I thought maybe there's something here. The more that I read, the more that I talked to folks, the more I realized maybe there's a book here. So we sold the book actually on my daughter's first birthday, which is very monumental for me because it was like, oh, right, motherhood doesn't actually have to kill who I am as a professional, which is really nice. Um, and I wrote it throughout 2024. I did ended up doing interviews with more than 130 leaders across a bunch of different sectors. Yes, members of Congress and politicians, but also CEO of Snapchat and rabbis and teachers and doctors and corporate executives. And I kept hearing the same echoes of themes across all those conversations. So the book came out in last May, and I was thinking back about what that moment was like. It was a month before Mamdani won the mayoral primary here in New York. It was a couple weeks before these stories started coming out, a survey that Glassdoor did that said millennials now make up a majority of all managers and Gen Z make up about 1 in 10. It was a couple months into the conversation about generational change, about a need for a new group of leaders to take over in politics and business and media. And then hearing from people over the last year who've read the book or listened to the book or skimmed it at the library. And I've been like, this gave me a language to talk about a thing I didn't know I was struggling with. or it gave me like really helpful, concrete advice, or from Gen Xers who were pissed that they were entirely left out of the book, which classic Gen X response. It's just been so cool to hear and to feel really gratified that I was right. I love being right, but also that I was really speaking to something people were challenged by.
Well, I think I'm on the tail end of Gen X. I turned 48 in August, so I actually saw a lot of folks in my, half generation above in this book, but I really appreciate it. So, okay, so put me down as somebody who thinks we're in uncharted territory in American politics. That's not, I don't think, super insightful, but you know, that includes the way we expect the business community, the legal community, to interact with government, interact with politics. What's your advice to people who are trying to sort of start out a little before us, or earlier than we are right
Yeah.
now in our careers that maybe are not directly in politics necessarily, but politics adjacent work like policy advocacy, consulting, stakeholder management, whatever it is. Like, how do you think folks should be making sense of this in a pretty volatile and difficult to predict environment?
I think there's a couple ways to think about it. One is personally, like make sure that your job is not your political home, which is a really hard thing to do, especially if you work even quasi-related or admission-related work. If you have a job that feels like a calling, like if you're in education or, if you're in media, where it feels like this is the thing you're meant to do and it's how you want to make a difference in the world. That's important. It's good. But don't make that the only place you do your politics. Because if you expect your job to fulfill both your political and sort of like moral obligations, as well as your actual economic ones, you're going to be screwed. You need to have a political home outside of your job. And that's really important. Now, professionally, I think I'm related to this. Be really clear about what are your values as an individual or as a leader, and then what are the organization's values, and what is the difference between the two? Because often, even if you're starting your own thing, there is some distinction between the two. And then where are the places where you can push the organization or the team or the company's activity to be a little bit more values forward? Because there's often, I think, some of the frustration that people have with their workplaces is when they talk about believing in one thing and then behave differently. So, when as much as possible, you can sort of close the distance between those, knowing that they're never going to mesh perfectly with where you are as an individual, I think that can help deal with some of the cognitive dissonance people feel and the frustration they feel with their employer.
So switching gears a little bit, I reached out to you originally because of a couple of different messages that I've seen
Mhm.
you kind of drive in your public engagement. And the
Yeah.
first of those is what I would sort of characterize, and feel free to disagree with the characterization, but I would characterize as sort of family policy in politics. And you've posted about candidates, public officials talking about family leave, other priorities Democrats and other candidates have to embrace. I got sort of started myself in political work accidentally, um, as helping legislators, members of Congress, and so on push back on school vouchers, these taxpayer
Mhm.
subsidies for private school. Um, but everywhere I've been, 23 states and counting now, I kind of hear the same thing at this point. It started a couple of years back after people got, we know you hate vouchers and so on, but what are Democrats actually for? Like, what's the progressive vision of these things? Um, What's the message? I mean, we've got a lot of policy one-offs on the progressive side of policy. I mean, tons of policy one-offs. I think a lot of them are really good. But I don't know that there's actually like this thing, like on the voucher side and the right wing side. The Pete Hegseth wrote a whole damn book about this thing. They call it education freedom. That is a lot easier to say than graduated tax credit for families making under 350% of the power limit or whatever it is, right? So what is your take on all this? I mean, what am I off base on this? Like, how do you think about how progressives should be talking about policy and politics, especially when it comes to kids and families?
I think you got to get back to, not to get like techie on you, but like,
Yeah.
what are the first principles here? Like, what are we actually trying to accomplish and trying to solve for? And I think we're at a moment where we get to really reimagine things or imagine anew. It's not even going backwards, it's looking forwards. Like Trump has done in some ways the hard part, which is tearing everything down. I think one of the challenges that Democrats have had, honestly, over the last couple of decades is that because we helped build these institutions and these establishments, we have a hard time sort of thinking, like, what could it look like if we were starting fresh? It's not it's why so many of our policies are, like, nipping around the edges where it's like, the 300% increase of this kind of deduction, like, it's
Yeah.
because we don't necessarily want to do the hard, scary thing of just starting over. Trump destroyed the Department of Education. Like, he did it. He did the hard part. It was terrible, horrible, huge consequences. Okay, what does a new version of that look like? Like, what are we actually trying to build in our public education system that meets the moment and that could build sustainably for the next 100 years? What are we trying to build with, like, our foreign aid, with our family policies? What are our values? I think this is where, you see candidates who can really succeed are ones who have a strong set of values and maybe aren't as committed to any particular tactic so much as they know what they wanna do. Like, you wanna build a society where people can live where they wanna live, can get their kids a good education, can have, like, fulfilling lives, can spend time with their family and friends. They don't feel overly burdened by government, but also feel like government is there to support them and enable their ambitions and their dreams. That's a really hard thing to navigate through, but what would we build if we were doing that? I think that is the question. There's much smarter policy thinkers than me. I am not a policy wonk in the slightest. What I do think is that we have a chance in this moment to start fresh and start from first principles, from what is the thing we're trying to build, and then work from there. I think that's where Democrats often get lost is we get stuck in reality and we stop being able to dream, which is really sad.
I love it. I mean, I love that phrasing. So on this point, so you've talked about this too, and this is the second reason that I kind of wanted to chat.
Yeah.
So you've talked about this, I think mostly in terms of again how candidates communicate, but broader than this, this idea of being flexible on policy, consistent and strong on values.
Mhm.
Um, ho- I think that nails it. I think it's especially important for folks engaged in the policy community, but I wonder too h- how when we're walking through this wreckage that you talked about, has wrecked a lot of things, right? Some of this also means engaging in the world that we do live in, and while we're dreaming, while we're trying to move
Yeah.
forward, right? So some of the flexibility on policy, I think, also has to come through, unfortunately, picking up the pieces a little bit, at
Mhm.
least over the next, say,
Yeah.
5 years or whatever it looks like. How do you have any sense of folks who are kind of good at this idea of flexibility on policy, consistency on values, or how do you try to talk about this in the work you guys do at Run for Something? Whichever way you wanna go with this, just,
We think about this in terms of people have to reflect the place they're in and be committed to community first and foremost. So, in 2025, good example here. Same night, same election year, same cycle, same team, we were able to elect Kelsey Bond, a DSA candidate, union organizer, renter who was running on really aggressive tenant reform, climate justice, workers' justice, like connecting these issues of actually housing and transportation issues are working family issues because if you can't get to your job, how are you gonna make a living? If you don't have green space to spend, like to enjoy time with your kids, how are you gonna enjoy your family? And same night, we helped elect Andrew Harbaugh, who's a former Republican who left the party on January 6th. So he was all in through Trump won. But the insurrection was a step too far, which I appreciate. He's a sports journalist, parent of two, for whom the Department of Education cuts really affected his kid with special needs in the public school system. And he was like, you know what? Screw this. I'm going to run for office as a Democrat. He was running in a deep red rural county in Pennsylvania that Trump won 70-30. And he flipped a seat red to blue. Do he and Kelsey talk about the issues in the same way? No. Do they think about the issues in the same way? Kind of. Are they generally rowing in the same direction? And do they reflect the communities they're in? 100%. And that's what matters. When we think about how we're going to win in the future and how we're going to be able to win in deep red places and purple ones and give people leaders in blue ones who can actually govern, that's how you do it. It's making sure that we talk about building a big tent. A tent still has a tent pole in the middle. It also still has walls. That means there are still boundaries and to a certain extent where you draw the line. I think that's part of the metaphor that people forget when they're talking about it. Like the values are are the tent pole. The borders are where we draw the line and how to make sure that to be inclusive, we're keeping still a little bit of the bigots and the hatefulness out.
alright, so last question, kind of
Yeah.
a wrap around here. So, all 3 of my kids will be voting in the next presidential
Oh,
election. Yeah, it's wild. 2 are voting this fall. My own parents are still alive, and they're doing okay.
good.
We're in that kinda sandwich generation, I think they call
Mhm.
it, maybe inartfully, but that's what it is. Um all these folks in my family, in my life have different opinions, different values, different needs. I think we mostly share the same
Mhm.
values, but opinions differ. Um, you got kids, you write and talk about this a lot and a lot about parenthood. With the caveat that candidates and political leaders can't be all things to everyone.
Yeah.
What is your advice for folks trying to speak to voters, to community leaders, community members at different stages in the life cycle? I mean, maybe go harder at advice if you want. Like, what do you want progressive leaders to be talking about to reach this broader section of American families as possible? And I'll sort of just say, the other side on a lot of this stuff talks families, 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 and they've weaponized the concept of families and they've weaponized the concept of parenting. And I think we got to get it back, but I think it takes some communications. What do you have to say about this?
I think sometimes Democrats have a tendency to um, focus on facts over feelings. And, the Republican Party notoriously over the last couple of years have been like, fuck your feelings, you little snowflakes, whatever. It's like, one, feelings are really important because people do not engage with politics on an intellectual level. Most people, if you have like an intellectual conversation or a framework for how you engage in politics, you are much more engaged than 90% of the American electorate, 95% of the American electorate. Most people are thinking about it in terms of feelings. I think this is one of the challenges of Biden in 2024, and one of the things that Trump's going to struggle with in 2026 is you can't tell people the economy is good when they don't feel like it's good. Whether or not the numbers are there, and with Biden maybe they were, with Trump they were absolutely not. Like if it feels hard, you've got to speak to that feeling and then give people a path out of it. Honestly, it's very much like parenting. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and my 3-year-old had a massive meltdown this morning. We were getting ready to leave for school, and she was upset because her little sister got her shoes on first, and she felt like she was losing, and how could we let the baby win? It's like, 1, that's insane. It's objectively insane. It doesn't matter who wins and who loses in putting their shoes on first. But for me to say that to her, and I was because I'm exhausted, like, that doesn't help her. That doesn't help you gotta speak to how people are feeling and then give them both permission to feel that way and then a path to the next feeling. I think that's where what Democrats are talking about. How do you, like, speak to so many generations right now? Everyone of every age is feeling frustrated. Everyone of every age feels like things are harder than they should be. And everyone of every age feels like they can't have the life that they want. Like, whether that life that they want is being able to retire and spend time with their family, but actually they can't afford to live near their kids or their kids can't afford to live near them. Or if you're younger, you maybe can't afford to have the kind of family that you want. Or if you're younger still, is like, screw you, I'm not gonna have a family. I'm gonna be gambling because the future is totally unreliable. Who knows what it could look like? I'm spending it all on Kalshi in the prediction markets. I think speaking to that anxiety and to that uncertainty, there's lots of different ways in which policies could speak to that. But those policies as a candidate are less important than what they reflect about your values and who you're fighting for and how you understand how people are feeling. So that's what I would recommend to candidates and leaders at large now is like understand how people are feeling. And the way that you understand that is by talking to them and actually listening and then repeating it back to them. Honestly, it's parenting, but in politics.
Amanda Litman's a co-founder of Run for Something, author of the book When We're in Charge: The Next Generation's Guide to Leadership. It's a year old now, but more relevant today than ever before. I think we are going to get cut off as soon as I close this out. So just thank you, thank you. Appreciate the work you're doing out there, and keep it up.
Thank you for having me.
Happy book birthday, by the way.
Thank you.
Take care.